Hey, it's May. Welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to try a traditional drawing, like a whole drawing, not just a sketch, to practice coloring with alcohol markers. I recently purchased a set of ohuhu markers and I've been really happy with them so far in my sketching routine, and so I wanted to try doing a whole finished piece with them. I want to put a clear disclaimer that this is not sponsored. I bought these with my own money, so all of my thoughts and opinions expressed in this video are entirely my own. I'm not being paid to say any of this. This is just my opinion. These were not sent to me. I'm not affiliated with ohuhu in any way, shape, or form, other than being a happy customer. So at first I thought this would be easy, but I was humbled very quickly. I didn't realize how used to digital art I was. Typically when I do digital art, I'm used to doing full pieces, from sketch to line art to color to final rendering and polish, with the added luxury of easy undo, being able to use every color imaginable, not to mention lighting effects, gradient maps. And when I'm working traditionally, I rarely ever finish any pieces, because usually I'm just working in my sketchbook, and usually they're not finished pieces. I'd like to change that. I have been thinking of getting back into acrylic painting on canvas, and I'd love to do more finished pieces in my sketchbooks too, but I think for ease of posting too, because I do like to post my finished artworks, I'm not that good at photographing my traditional pieces, and I think that's primarily why I almost exclusively do finished pieces in digital. But oh my goodness, again, it was extremely humbling, especially at the point when I was doing the line art here. I didn't realize how rough my line art style is until I was faced with it head on without the crutch of an undo button. That's something we all joke about all the time. Oh, there's no undo button. But when I experienced it firsthand, I was like, I messed up and I can't fix it. But it's okay, we're gonna go with it. So here we're picking the colors. I went with the 216 set, and let me tell you, it is so much fun picking from this vast variety of colors. It is literally like candy. Coming from a former Copic user and my very sparse collection that I painstakingly put together over the course of years, and you know, trying to choose which color to buy because they're so expensive, so it's like you have to choose wisely to build your collection. And now going to this where it's like just right off the bat you can have all the colors, and it's like, really? I can use all these colors? It's wonderful. I say former Copic user, but honestly I haven't quite decided yet what I'm going to do with my Copic markers. Honestly, I've actually really liked ohuhu enough that I'm considering the possibility of selling my Copic markers in the future, but I haven't come to a final decision yet. If I do though, I'll probably make a tweet or something, or like say something on my Instagram story offering to sell them. But again, I haven't decided yet, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, traditional art is definitely a skill set that I really need to work on, especially if I do plan on ever making finished pieces and if I want them to look nice. Because there's so many more things involved that I have to think about that I don't usually think about because I'm usually working digitally, like not smearing the ink before it dries, having to come up with quick creative fixes for mistakes, and having to just learn to move on when I can't fix something, even though it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. Whereas in digital, I'm used to being able to erase not only the digital ink line art, I can even wipe the whole canvas and start over if I'm not happy with it, but I don't have that luxury here, so again, we're just gonna go with it. But honestly, this did turn out cute enough. I do like it for what it is. I also planned it out and stuff too, like I did plenty of thumbnails before starting the actual piece, so the composition is exactly how I imagined it. It's more like my technical skill wasn't where I imagined it to be. But that said, again, I'm primarily a digital artist, so it wasn't completely fair of myself to expect the same level of skill that I'm usually able to deliver in a digital format, especially because I'm just so used to sketching anyway, so of course my traditional pieces are gonna look more rough, because I'm not used to doing finished, polished pieces in a traditional setting. I mentioned that I'm not good at photographing traditional art. Well, I'm not really that great at recording it either. There's a lot involved with that too. You have to be careful not let your hand get in the shot too much, because the camera will focus on your hand and not the drawing. I also have to be careful not to block the drawing with my hand. And lighting, oh my goodness. Even with 3 lamps propped up on my desk, the footage always still shows up dark, and I always have to lighten it a ton in post. There was a point where it was morning and the sunlight hit my desk in the most perfect way. You might be able to tell when that is in the video, but that sunlight is the most perfect type of lighting, and the sunspot was moving and I kept having to move my sketchbook. I was just like, why can't the sun just stay in one spot? But it's all a process to be learned and improved upon over time. What is art without the journey? Anyway, let's talk about how the actual markers handle. So before I got ohuhus, like I said, I was primarily a Copic user. It was a lot of fun collecting an assortment of colors. I even made my own swatch sheet for them and a list of all the colors that I had so far to keep track of. Copics are very expensive, but I've never bought a marker at full price. I always made sure to use a coupon of some kind whenever I purchased one. I don't have a ton of Copics, but I was able to put together a collection of just enough of most of the color families. I have to be honest, even though I made the most of the colors that I had in Copic, when I received the ohuhu set of 216 with basically a full range of color right away, it was very liberating to use right off the bat. Having a full range of colors, along with the slightest hues and tints of those colors, like I said, it was like candy being able to pick from so many choices right off the bat. And speaking of candy, these markers are so vibrant. And that's one major difference that I've noticed between ohuhu and Copic. Both have excellent color quality, and the difference is very, very minimal. But if the saturation and vibrance is important to you, like it is for me and my art style, ohuhus deliver a juicy, saturated color without being too overbearing in my opinion. And again, the difference between the color vibrancy of the two brands is honestly so minuscule, but with the price point being so starkly different, with Copic averaging from like $5 to $8 a marker in the States versus ohuhu's price per marker being well below $1 a marker, that subtle difference in color quality is just way more pronounced. I don't know. Even if you don't like the vibrant, saturated look, ohuhu still does offer a nice collection of more muted and pastel and subtle tones, and you can get all of them at the same time for a very reasonable price. And that does take away the fun of collecting colors, but I mean, with that price, you really just can't ignore the amount of money you save when the quality is pretty much on par anyway. Is any of what I'm saying making sense? I don't know who wrote the script. Oh, plus the ability to have brush tip and fine tip. Oh my goodness, this is my perfect marker. I love how ohuhu gives you the option to pick not only the set of colors that you want, because they only sell them in sets, but also the type of brush nibs that you want on each end. In my opinion and personal experience, brush tip and fine tip is the elite combo. Brush does a perfectly good job filling up large spaces, and I've noticed that doing a circular motion when releasing the ink sort of mitigates any streakiness, and the fine nib is perfect for getting the small details. I literally only ever used the brush side of my Copics, and the chisel side never held any value for me, so I was only ever using just one side of my expensive markers, but these markers I can freely use both sides. Again, for the sake of clarity, I have to reiterate that I'm not sponsored or affiliated with ohuhu in any way. All these opinions are totally my own. I did not receive any money to say this, and I bought these markers with my own money. I was just influenced by several other sponsorships, honestly. I'm just a happy customer. I would love to be sponsored by them in the future, but I also live in reality and I don't think I'll ever get a sponsorship from any. But that's totally fine. I enjoy being a customer too, which is so nice. The feeling of being really happy with a purchase, not having that buyer's remorse, especially when you're trying to save money and keep discretionary purchases very, very low. I decided I would just take the chance and get these for myself because I love alcohol markers, but a lot of my Copics were drying out and it's just as expensive to get them refilled. So my already small collection was getting smaller, and all the benefits of ohuhus just looked too good not to try, and honestly, I'm so glad I did. Now, definitely it's still something I have to practice and get better at, especially like smooth color mixing and picking the best palette of colors, portraying lighting better, and all that. I also want to note that I'm drawing on mixed media paper. It's not marker paper, so that might have an impact on how these handle too. I did buy an ohuhu sketchbook a very long time ago that I was planning on using as my next book anyway, and I'm 99% sure that's marker paper, so it'll be interesting to not only try these out there, but also see how all my other materials handle on that kind of paper too. Okay, enough about the materials, let's talk about the characters we're drawing here. So the reason I decided to draw the main protagonists and starters of Gen 5 Pokemon is because lately I've been replaying Pokemon White and loving it all over again. I really miss the pixel era of Pokemon. I did like Gen 6, but I think the point where I actually fell off a little bit was Gen 7, the Sun and Moon era. Even with Gen 6, I did recognize at that point that things were getting a little bit easier, and the biggest reason for that, I think, is totally the shared EXP point system. Now that I revisited the era of Pokemon where it had newer features but not new enough to have the shared EXP points, it still had the item where you just give it to one Pokemon if it needs added support to level up, but there's not like a mass shared EXP point system that's automatic and you can't turn it off and it just affects all your Pokemon. Now I can even more confidently say about default automatic shared EXP for both defeating and catching Pokemon. What an awful inclusion to add, honestly. In my opinion, that's the biggest factor in why modern Pokemon games are just too easy. And yes, it's always been a children's game, but a children's game can have some added challenge. That's the way they used to be anyway. It doesn't have to hold your hand the whole linear way and then dump endless information and tutorial on you to make sure you understand that fire is weak to water in order for kids to understand it. That's another thing. Cutscenes can be great for adding more interest to the story, but I feel like Sun and Moon in particular was just way too heavy on the cutscenes. It made it really laborious to get through, and oh my goodness, don't even get me started on friendly rivals. That's so funny, I bet you weren't expecting this. You were probably expecting, let's try out this art supply and see how we like it. And what you got was, let me tell you why modern Pokemon games are problematic and why the older ones are better. I'm just kidding. No offense to people who like the newer Pokemon games. There's plenty to like about them too. I just have a lot of opinions, especially about friendly rivals. If you know me, you know I cannot stand the friendly rival trope that Pokemon keeps trying to push. And again, no offense to anyone that likes that kind of thing. I just really miss the days where a rival felt like a rival, not just a friend who picks the type starter weaker to yours to give you an advantage and then heal your Pokemon after every interaction. I miss rivals like Blue and Silver who were like, not evil, but definitely out for your blood. I miss when a rival encounter was genuinely jarring and it made you like double take, like, oh my goodness, when did I last heal? Am I leveled up enough? I was not expecting this. With Black and White having the two rivals who are your childhood friends, I actually don't mind that, especially because I think it's creative how each of them choose the other two starters so none of them get left behind. And it's interesting to see each of them progress in their journey alongside you and realize what they want out of their own adventure and watching each of them get stronger. And even though they're your friends, they really want to win against you, and that competitive element is so lost in the whole friendly rival thing, in my opinion. Even though they were friendly towards you, they also weren't pushovers, and they definitely presented a challenge and didn't feel like they were just letting you win. I don't know, maybe I'm totally wrong. Let me know in the comments if you feel differently and why you feel that way. Maybe there's something to like about these friendly rivals that I'm just not seeing. Let me know if you like rivals that let you win. I'm just kidding. Another thing I love about Gen 5 that makes Unova my favorite region, besides Gen 1 and 3's Kanto for nostalgic reasons, is the added element of not just the day and night cycle, but also the 4 seasons. I love how the world changes around you with each season, how different areas get opened up or closed off, the Pokemon you find, and the forms of those Pokemon are different too sometimes. I also love how the world looks in general. It was at this point that Game Freak really did perfect the pixel art aesthetic of not only the environment around you that still feels big and feels like it has depth and dimension despite being a 2D game, but also the fact that every Pokemon sprite has its own unique animation, and the main character trainers all do too. It's just those little things that breathe life into the game and make it feel really immersive and engaging. And I heard someone mention this before, and I never truly noticed this for myself until it was pointed out and I started noticing it, but it's also to be said that not only do the regions feel way more linear in modern games, the element of exploration is also totally gone, despite the open world thing. Now, I have to say, I haven't gotten that far in Violet to really get a sense of its open world, which I think is an awesome concept that, for example, Legends Arceus pulled off perfectly, in my opinion. But I'm starting to notice too how older Pokemon games worlds felt way more interactive. You could actually go inside most all the buildings. You could talk to anyone. Even if they weren't a trainer, it was still likely they may have had something interesting to say or been important to talk to for your journey for another reason. The old games worlds weren't sculpted in a beautiful 3D 1080p 60 FPS open world graphics, but neither were the latest games either. But that didn't make them any less fun or engaging to explore, and it didn't make them feel any smaller or more uninteresting. And there was always an added element of imagination anyway, also because we were kids when most of us played those older games too, and that made up for the simpler graphics. Another thing that I think is important is the replayability factor. I mentioned earlier that having too many cutscenes can be a chore to get through, and it severely impacts the replayability of the game as well. If I want to relive the good memories of a game that I loved, my favorite ones are the ones where I can basically just pick it up and start playing. Stardew Valley is really good for that too. It gives you the option to skip the whole intro scene and just get right into cultivating your brand new plot of land for your farm. And what I really love about Gen 5, I think it's mostly in Black and White too though, I can't remember, is that you can rematch not only the Elite Four, but also all the gym leaders. And they have stronger teams than they had before when you rematch them, and I think that's really cool. And that battle subway thing where you can battle iconic characters from older games is also pretty cool. White 2 is the only game that I ever completed the most of, well into the post-game too. And it's the only game where I ever leveled up a good number of my Pokemon even to level 100 or close to it, like all on my own. And it was possible for me to do so because the post-game of White 2 was so full of content and replayable areas that it made the game like nowhere close to over once you were past the Hall of Fame. What I mean by I leveled up my Pokemon to level 100 all on my own, the only time that I ever had level 100 Pokemon before that was when I was in elementary school, and a good friend of mine at the time took my Pokemon Pearl game for me and action replayed it and put in like a ton of level 100 Pokemon and rare items, and I think like 999 Master Balls and event exclusive stuff, and it was really cool and I really loved it. I still have that cartridge to this day. But even though it was cool as a kid at the time to have those things, it sort of prevented me from being able to play Pearl properly after that. And now, all these years later, I get the itch to want to relive Sinnoh, and I don't want to restart my Pearl file because it has all those rare things in it. And if I want to get Platinum, even used, it's like exorbitantly expensive because Pokemon games unfortunately do not lose their value. In fact, they gain value, which is bad for people like me who don't want to restart their old files but want to relive their childhood, and not just in the form of watching someone play, but they want to play it themselves. Problems. Characters are really important too. As much as I love character customization and being able to buy clothes for my character, I swear with every new Pokemon game I feel like my main objective to go to each town is not to further the plot or go to the new gym leader, it's to find the next clothing store and see what clothes I can buy. But honestly, I really miss the era of like, okay, these are the two pre-established characters you can choose from. And yes, they represented an avatar for the player, but they could also be full-fledged characters on their own, already having their own name and personality more or less. I don't know, I just thought that was cool. I loved Harvest Moon for that too, which I guess is Story of Seasons now. These 4 Unova protagonists kind of remind me of another 4 protagonists I love, the farmers from Animal Parade and Tree of Tranquility. Oh, actually, if you notice here in the drawing time-lapse, the blendability of these markers is really nice. You can make new colors with them as well, as long as you put the new ink down when the old ink is wet enough. It's very much like watercolor working with alcohol markers, I've noticed. In the same way that with watercolor you have to build up the colors like from light to dark and you have to build them up, but also you can mix them, and as long as the ink is fresh, they blend really nicely. I mean, depending on the paper that you're using and your technique too. As you can see here, like circles, they definitely hide the streakiness more versus like if you were to do like literal streak patterns. But yeah, you can make new colors easily by blending these markers, which is another thing about them that I think is pretty cool. For the line art, I used the Sakura Pigma microns, and then after most of the color was placed down, I went over it again with, okay, so first round of line art was sepia, and after most of the color was placed, I went over it again with a black line art just to kind of bold in certain areas, make certain areas pop out, and then I used a white Jelly Roll pen for the highlights. I was considering whether or not I should go over the final illustration with colored pencil, because I think I would normally do something like that to give it a little bit more texture, but ultimately I decided for this piece to just let the markers shine on their own and not cover them up too much with too many other materials. I was also considering whether or not I should do like a little watercolor wash for the background, but again, I decided that simpler would be best. This is random, but which type of video do you guys enjoy most? The speed paint process or the real-time process like this one? And do you enjoy watching me draw digitally, or do you enjoy watching me draw traditionally more? I ought to get in the habit of digital sketching more, because like I said before, I only ever sketch traditionally and I do finished pieces digitally, but I really have to get in the habit of doing more digital art studies. I feel like that would be a good way to improve. Anyway, back to my ramble. If you're new here, sorry, I like to ramble. So characters. Not just the protagonist characters, but also the characters that you encounter throughout your journey in the world. All the Pokemon games have great characters, even the newer ones. To be totally honest though, as someone who gets attached to characters very easily, I'm still not very attached to Gen 7's or Gen 9's characters. They're mostly kind of forgettable to me. I'm sorry if you like those characters the most. I actually loved Gen 8's characters though. They really carried the game for me and made me blind to a lot of flaws that generation had. And when everyone else was complaining about it, I was one of the ones who was like, what's wrong with it? This is great. But that's the impact of having great characters in my opinion. I feel like less than stellar gameplay or plot or other elements can be more or less glossed over if the characters are really cool and likable. Unova has an excellent group of characters. Gym leaders, rivals, protagonists, extras, and lineup of Pokemon too. I know a lot of people didn't like how Black and White made a whole new group of 150 Pokemon, but I actually thought that was such a great idea to start fresh in this new region and to try to recapture that feeling of playing Pokemon again for the very first time, not being familiar with any Pokemon already to fall back on. You had to get to know and build up a whole new team, which I thought was pretty fun. Anyway, thanks for listening to my whole ramble about how much I love Unova and older Pokemon games and stuff. Thank you for your patience through all that. If you were here purely for an in-depth review of these ohuhu markers, then I'm sorry. Hopefully at the very least my rambles were good background noise for whatever else you happen to be doing while watching my video. I shared a lot of Pokemon related opinions in this video. If you have any opinions of your own that conflict with mine or agree with mine, let me know in the comments. I want to know what your thoughts on all these subjects are too. Anyway, so here's the finished product. It's okay. I need to work on my traditional art skills a little bit more, but I'm happy with it how it is. It turned out cute, and you can really tell the joy from all four of them, and their little Pokemon too. They look like they're about to go on an adventure, so it's great. If you enjoyed this video and you're interested in seeing more of my art, please consider subscribing and visiting me at the socials listed below. Thanks for watching, bye!